Joining us now, an FTX investor who lost $2 million in the collapse, Evan Luthra. Evan, it's great to see you again. And I want to first start by getting your reaction to Sam Bankman-Fried not only participating, but speaking very loosely in this New York Times Deal Book conference yesterday, and also appearing on Good Morning America this morning, when investors like you want to know who's trying to get to the bottom of what actually happened here.
Yes, it's very surprising and actually pisses me off that he's using the media to frame a narrative that benefits him and influencing a lot of people in the wrong direction. It is already very clear that whatever he's saying online on TV is false. He's trying to keep blame away, blame Alameda. All the time we've seen documents just come out that late 2020 he was signing documents for companies Alameda was acquiring, but he was the one signing those documents. It was his signature. So he was very well aware of what was happening. FTX grew pretty fast in 3 years. You don't grow so fast and raise 15 billion in user deposits without knowing what's going on. So he was very well aware. This is not a doubt. Yeah. There's a lot of evidence pointing towards it. So he's lying. He's blatantly lying. And I am very surprised at all these mainstream media giving him that stage. Yeah. They should not be giving him that stage at all.
It's surprising to me because I think back to Bernie Madoff and I think of when he was exposed. If 2 weeks later, not only was he not under arrest, but he was sitting down with the New York Times at a conference, and there was at one point where he laughed or smirked and said that he had a bad month, and everybody in the room laughed as well. I imagine that would be offensive to investors like you. We've got a soundbite from yesterday, though. Let's listen to it.
Are things I would give anything to be able to do over again. I was shocked by what happened this month. Look, I screwed up. I was the CEO of FTX. I had a responsibility. There was no person who was chiefly in charge of positional risk of customers on FTX, and that feels pretty embarrassing in retrospect.
I'm just curious, how it feels to you when you hear him say, I screwed up. We had no risk controls in place. I mean, how could that be?
I mean, he needs to realize there's consequences to screwing up, right? A lot of people screw up, but then they pay what's due. So I think he needs to be behind bars right now, and somebody needs to take action on him right now. Whoever is responsible needs to step up and deliver the responsibilities. He should not be there. He's a criminal. He's broken a lot of laws, and he was very well aware of what was happening. This did not happen overnight. You cannot spend $10 billion that has gone missing overnight. So I'm quite sure that he was aware of what was happening. So yeah. These are all blatant lies that he's giving.
And then today, Senate Agriculture Committee has the chairman of the CFTC in. They're holding a hearing. They're asking a lot of questions about regulation. And I thought this was an interesting twist for two reasons. Number one, why aren't you questioning Sam Bankman-Fried? Or maybe the Justice Department or the U.S. Attorney's Office is planning to do that. We don't know. But number two, he allegedly supported legislation that was proposed to have the CFTC regulate crypto instead of the SEC. And the speculation there is that the CFTC would have been a little bit of an easier mark for them versus the SEC, who might have been a little stricter. It seems like everything that this man did was very calculated, very thought out, including the donations that he made to different senators' campaigns. And we've got a full screen of some of their photos there. You can see here you've got both Republicans and Democrats, Evan, but you imagine that some of these people are going to be deciding his fate. And you think about Hunter Biden and his China dealings and people saying, well, the president could potentially be compromised because of those dealings. You look at these senators and say, well, they may be compromised in how they deal with this.
100%. I think there is definitely somebody giving him a lot of support behind the scenes, a lot of influence. There is no way this guy is out there without having any issues. He should already be scared of being in jail. He should already be in jail. So we definitely have to question those donations that have been made. And everybody knows by now the donations were not his money to donate. They should already be refunding these donations. Why they have not done is a big question also to these politicians and senators. So 100% he's getting the support, and we need to, somebody needs to also inspect into this.
All right, this is really important. Chairman of the CFTC said this at the hearing today.
Somehow 2% of U.S. customers have exposure to FTX. Folks will find a way to get exposure to offshore entities or activities, even if it's prohibited in the U.S., and we have to do something about that.
So do you agree with him that even if crypto is more regulated, people who are investors will find other ways or they'll go invest offshore? Do you agree with him? Because it sounds to me like he's somehow, in some ways, not making light of it. He's saying we need to find a solution. But having said that, he's saying, look, people are going to do it.
I mean, yes, end of the day, I mean, the fundamentals of Bitcoin have not changed, right? Bitcoin is about giving power back to the people and taking power away from a centralized system. And that is still true right today and stronger than ever. Not your keys, not your crypto. But end of the day, what Sam Bankman-Fried has done is broken out normal laws. This would, even if this was not in crypto, this was all, should already be in jail. So that kind of stuff, like going after outright crime, is very normal. You don't need no more regulation for that.
Right.
This is to follow the regulation that's already in place. You need to go and arrest him. Well,
and that's the thing. You bring up a great point there, and I just want to clarify that for our viewers. They keep asking the question, well, why isn't he in jail, or why hasn't he been extradited from the Bahamas? That's because no formal charges have been brought, and until that happens, you can't enforce the extradition. Evan, we are out of time, and we appreciate your time tonight. We will continue to have conversations with you as this plays out. Thank you.